You're watching PEGRI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.
Hello, my name is Selena. This is Bible Tea Time for Children.
The Holy Scriptures. Let the word bring you joy and knowledge.
Everyone, your attention, please.
This is Bible Tea Time for Children. Hi, my name is Selena. Welcome to Bible Tea Time for Children. Today, I'm dressed like a cheetah. They live in the wild in Africa. Did you know that God loves the animals and every creepy crawling thing? After all, He made them. Proverbs 12:10 says, "A good man takes care of his animals." Well, today we have Wildlife Rescue of Rhode Island. And my special guest will tell us how to help and rescue injured animals. Hi, special guest. Thank you for coming on the show. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Selena. Thanks so much for having me come on your show.
You're welcome.
My name is Kristin Fletcher, and I one of many people in the state who work to help all the injured and orphaned wildlife that people find.
Well, that's a good job to have.
It is a good job to have.
If you want to become a wildlife rescue person, you have to take care of lots of animals. Tell us how many animals you have.
Well, over the course of a year, we probably take care of around 5,000 birds and animals a year in the state of Rhode Island alone. So
Wow.
a lot of them.
That's a lot.
Sure is.
You need lots of responsibility. Let's off to the next question.
Okay.
Tell us, what is RI Wildlife Rehab all about?
So the Wildlife Rehabilitators Association of Rhode Island is a group of pretty much private citizens who are trained and licensed specifically to help wild animals and wild birds. So we don't do much with cats and dogs because there are lots of other organizations in the state that do that. But we're the people that will help the squirrels and the rabbits and the raccoons and the bats and all kinds of birds and lots of seagulls because we live in the ocean state, so we get lots of seagulls in all the time.
What is private citizen?
Private citizens are just people who are home or maybe going to the grocery store or even at school and they find an animal that's been hurt somehow, or maybe a baby bird that's on the ground and they're not sure whether that bird needs any help. So we're the people that they can call and we can decide together whether that animal needs to come to us for medical help or whether it's a baby and it can stay where it is if it's in a safe spot.
Why is this organization so important to Rhode Island?
It's important because according to the state laws and even the federal laws, the government laws, you have to be trained and have a license to be able to handle and help injured and orphaned wildlife. And if there aren't enough people to do that, then any animal that's injured or orphaned by those laws, they need them to be put down because there's nobody to help them, because you need to be trained and licensed. And there aren't a lot of us that do that. So that's why it's so important, so that when an animal gets hit by a car or maybe hits a window, that there are people who are trained and know how to take care of those critters so that we can try to get them back out, into their yard or the fields they live in.
That's good. But what does federal mean?
Federal means the United States government. So we have town governments or city governments like Pawtucket, and then we have the state government, and we have our senators, and certainly we have a governor, and then we have the United States government. And so the United States government has laws as well that tell you how you can handle wild animals. So we have to follow both state laws and federal government laws.
I bet you love animals. Do you enjoy your job?
I do enjoy my job. I really like my job when we can fix somebody and let them go again. So if a bird gets injured and we can somehow fix them and let them go, that's the best part.
Why is it so important to save and protect wild animals?
Well, in Rhode Island, there's lots and lots and lots of people. And I think every year, because there's so many people, we have to build more houses, or we need more grocery stores and things like that. And so what happens is lots of the places that used to be fields or used to be, forests, they aren't there anymore. And so the wild animals and birds that used to live in those areas now live very, very close to people. And because of that, they get hit by cars, or they hit windows, or sometimes people let their cats out and the cats will get them. Or there's just not a lot of food left anymore because the areas that used to have lots of food for them don't exist anymore. People's houses are there, or stores are there. So.
When I looked up on your website, there was like something about your pets eating and hurting the wild animals, like grown-up birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that happens sometimes. That certainly, pets are in even in my yard. I have a fenced-in yard that my dogs will go out there, and I have to be careful because in the spring sometimes the birds will nest in my trees and the babies will jump down on the ground, and I have to be careful that my dogs don't find them because they'll play with them, and that's how they get hurt sometimes.
What do you mean by play with them?
Well, because the baby bird may be hopping around, and dogs like to play with things, so they think that it's a toy to play with, and cats will do the same thing. So sometimes we get animals in that have been wild animals that have been caught by people's pets.
It's really sad.
But lots of times we can fix them. And then if you know at a certain time of year the baby's around, you just have to be mindful that there aren't babies in the backyard, or if you know they're there, just be careful where your pets go. Because they don't stay there forever. They do move on, and they learn to fly and they move on, or baby squirrels will learn to, run away from pets.
What kind of animals get rescued?
We rescue every kind of wild animal that lives in Rhode Island. So we will rescue certainly lots and lots of squirrels and baby bunnies. We get a lot of those guys. And then we get raccoons and every kind of bird that you can think of that lives in Rhode Island. We've even gotten bald eagles in before. But we get little hummingbirds and great blue heron. They're big birds. Again, all the way up to bald eagles. Not too many of those, but we've gotten them before. Mice. Sometimes people bring us little tiny baby mice.
That would be cute.
We have gotten rats before, wild rats that live out there. We try to help every single animal, every single kind of animal and bird that someone brings to us. We do our best to try to help them.
Do you also care for insects?
We don't know a lot about insects, although sometimes people will call. There are lots of good people out there that want to help things that are injured, and sometimes somebody will find a praying mantis or a butterfly, and I'm afraid we don't know a lot about that. They're pretty fragile too, so I'm not really sure that we can help with that. I wish we could.
How many actually live, and who heals them?
What do you mean? How many of the animals we get live?
Let me read that again. How many actually live, and who heals them?
Well, depends on the animal. It's hard to say over the course of a year how many of them will live because It depends on how injured they come in. So if you're a little bird and you get hit by a car and you're that little, there's a good chance that something's really, really wrong, and sometimes we can't fix that. And what we try to do with them is the ones that we can help, the ones we can fix, we'll set their wings if they're broken or their legs. We'll give them the right medicines. Sometimes they come in and they're very, very thin because they haven't been able to find a lot of food, and we'll make sure that they get the right kind of food to survive. And then as soon as they're ready to go back to their lives, then we'll bring them back again. But it's hard to tell from year to year how many will survive, just because it depends on what their injuries are. Most of the time, if they're babies that come in, we're able to save most of those guys and get them back out again once they're old enough to live on their own. We'll keep them until they're able to live on their own and find food.
How many different ages do you take care of?
We get all of them. We get in tiny guys. As we talked about, mice come in, they look like little pink erasers. They're so tiny. Squirrels are the same thing. We'll get pink babies. We call them pinkies. And then we'll get older animals too. If bats will actually live to about 26 or 27 years. So we, occasionally may get a bat in that's run into some trouble, and it could be an older animal too. And even pigeons sometimes. We'll help pigeons because there aren't a lot of places that will help those guys. And I know that I got one in that was, I think he's about 18 or 19 years old now. So we get little tiny ones in, and we get older ones in too.
Once healed, do they go back to where they were found?
They do, and actually it makes sense that they go back to where they're found, especially the adults, because maybe they have a mate, maybe they have a nest, they know where the food is, they know where the water is, it's where their home is. So yes, we bring them back to where they belong. And actually that's one of the federal laws that you and I spoke about earlier, is that you have to bring the adult animals and birds back to where they came from, within 1 mile of where they came from. So yes, we do that.
Who rescues or picks up the animals? And what happens next?
What will happen is, let's see, this morning I got a phone call at my house at 7 o'clock, first thing in the morning, and a lady was driving to work and she saw an owl get hit by a truck. And the owl ended up on the side of the road, and so she stopped, and she had a box in her car, and she was able to safely get him into a box, and she called me to see what to do next. So the first part of your question is anybody who finds an animal or bird and has a big enough heart to want to help them. So everybody will help them for the most part. And then people will frequently know how to reach us because they've done so before. Lots of times, animal control officers for the towns will give out our phone number. Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, they will give out our phone number. And so people will reach out to us, and then we will tell them the closest place to bring the animal. So I have people who are called wildlife rehabilitators, and they're licensed at their own home to help these animals. So if this lady were in Portsmouth, say, she could have brought it to my house because I'm licensed there. Or she can bring it to the Wildlife Clinic of Rhode Island, which is out in Saunderstown, part of North Kingston, and we'll take the owl there as well, which is where that owl ended up. Ended up at the Wildlife Clinic this morning. So,
which place is closer?
Depends on where she was. She was in Pawtucket. This morning. She was in Pawtucket. So she waited a little bit and drove it out to the wildlife clinic. No place is too far in Rhode Island. It's a small state. So it never takes too far to get the wild animal or bird to help.
Is there a clinic or a hospital that we can take these injured animals to?
Absolutely. So the Wildlife Clinic of Rhode Island, as I mentioned, is in North Kingston. It's right on the highway, so it's easy to get to. After hours, when the clinic is closed, you can call the number there. It's called the Wildlife Hotline, and it will list on the phone all of the rehabilitators and the sorts of animals they help. So my name is the first one to come up, and it says all species. So people can call me when the clinic is closed, and depending on where they are in the state, I can tell them the closest person to reach out to and bring the animal to. So we can get that animal help as quickly as possible. So we have rehabilitators around the state.
That's good. How can someone watching this program get involved and help?
Well, because again, we have to deal with the state regulations. You have to be 18 years old to be able to volunteer at the clinic, and you also have to have a license to do that. So we do train people to do that. But I also get Girl Scout groups that will sometimes call and want to help, and they'll build squirrel boxes, or they'll put out boxes in stores and they'll collect things that we need, like paper towels or tissue or bird seed or suet, the sorts of stuff that we need all the time, and they'll collect those things from others and make those donations to us. It's also good to make sure that you put trash where it belongs, because animals can get in trouble when there's a lot of trash around. If people like to fish, do you like to go fishing? Okay. So the big thing about fishing is here in Rhode Island, there's lots of places to fish, but sometimes people's fishing stuff gets left behind, and that's the fishing line or the hooks. And we get lots of seabirds in that get caught up in that and get very injured, or actually will swallow the hooks because there'll be a lure that looks like a fish on it. And we get a lot of animals that are really, really seriously hurt by the stuff that sometimes people who fish will leave behind. So collecting that stuff and throwing it away properly is really important. And then sometimes, you know, especially in the winter when there's not a lot of food out, maybe having a bird feeder in your yard or some suet out for them. For the birds and the squirrels, they're looking for food. Winter's hard if you're a wild animal. It's cold outside and there's not as much food out there in the winter. So putting out the right kinds of food like bird seed or suet helps some of them get through the winter too.
What is suet?
Suet is a kind of fat, and you can buy it in the grocery store, and it's just for birds, and it looks like they call them suet cakes. And you can put it in there's actually a suet holder that you can hang from the tree. But it's fat, and sometimes it has seed in it, and the birds like to eat it. And it's high fat, so it's good for them in the winter because it keeps them nice and chunky.
Is it like those balls with seeds on them?
Yeah, probably the very same thing.
Because when I was in pre-K, I made them.
There you go. So you made it. Yeah.
Yeah. We put peanut butter in it, though.
That's exactly what you did then. Yep, you made something out there for the birds. So those sorts of things are helpful.
We hang them on the fence.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Or bushes or trees.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
What can we do when we find an animal that needs help?
I think the first thing to do is to check with an adult, mom or dad, or whoever you're with, to see if, you know, this animal is actually injured. But the wildlife clinic has a phone number that you can call pretty much around the clock to get the right information. So you can check in with us and we'll let you know whether, we'll let you know whether that animal or bird needs some help. But I would suggest that as a rule, if you find something, that you don't touch it, because wild animals and birds are afraid of us. They don't want to be hurt. And so you wouldn't want to get bitten or scratched. So touching them is not a good idea until you maybe talk to mom and dad and maybe they can take care of that side of it. You wouldn't want to injure somebody further too by picking them up. So asking for help is the way to go there.
What about a bat? How would you hold a bat?
Well, you don't, and even I don't touch bats. So there are some animals in the state that you never, ever, ever touch. It's really tricky catching them or collecting them if they need help, and bats are one of them. Bats are one, raccoons are another, fox, woodchuck, and skunks. So those are guys that, even if they're little babies, no one should ever really touch them without calling and getting direction first. You never touch them with bare hands.
You use gloves?
Well, you can use gloves or you can use towels, but it would have to be very special circumstances for someone to do that, because those animals can carry a very, very serious disease that people can get called rabies. And so it's very, very important that no one goes near those animals. Even if they're injured, they would have to call for help from us first. Or DEM has officers that would help.
I've heard that bats have a disease, some bats have a disease called black nose syndrome. What is it?
White nose syndrome. You were close there.
Right.
That's actually a fungus. So it's a fungus that grows on the bats who live in caves. So some bats live in caves, or crevice bats, and then other bats live in trees. And those are called tree bats. And the ones that live in caves, it was kind of a new fungus that came into the United States, they think, from somebody visiting caves in Europe. They brought it back. And they first found it in New York, I believe. And the fungus, while these bats are hibernating in the winter, the fungus covers them. So when you see them, you can see it on their nose and it looks white. So it's called white nose syndrome. But what it does is it actually will make them uncomfortable, and they will wake up from hibernating maybe in the middle of the winter. And they will fly, they'll come out, and they will actually die because they're not able to live in the winter out. They should be hibernating, and they may be thin, or they haven't had anything to drink for a long time, and they will die from that. So lots and lots and lots of bats have died from white nose syndrome. But there are lots of scientists that are studying how to fix that situation. So they're working really hard on that. But millions and millions of bats have died because of white nose syndrome. And they did find some here in Rhode Island, some bats with white nose syndrome, and they found it in I believe in the soil in Newport. I believe it was Newport. So, but not all bats have white nose syndrome.
Yeah, that's good. Are there different treatments for different species?
Yes. So some animals can take certain medicines when they're sick, but that same medicine can kill other animals. So, for instance, if, say, a baby squirrel has a run-in with a cat and it needs to be put on an antibiotic because you want to fight an infection. Squirrels can take one kind of medication, but you can't give the same medication to, say, a bunny because it can kill the bunny. So you have to be trained, which is what we talked about before. That's why people need training and to be licensed to know how to treat certain animals. Sometimes even just knowing the right food to feed them can be kind of tricky. So that's where the training comes in.
If someone finds a wild animal, like a baby owl or something, can they keep it as a pet and care for it themselves?
Nope, that's against the law. And if it is an animal, say a squirrel or a bunny or a raccoon, that's the state law that says it is absolutely illegal to do that. If it is a bird, like an owl you mentioned, that's actually the federal law. That's the U.S. government law that also says, along with the state, that it's illegal to keep it as a pet. And part of the reason for that is that wild animals and birds are really specialized creatures. So they're not like cats and dogs that have been raised to live with people. These are wild animals, and lots of times just what they eat. I mean, think about an owl out there is looking for mice, live mice out there. And it doesn't like to be around humans because as far as they're concerned, maybe we can hurt them. We're considered predators. So they're very frightened to be around us. And so that's why it's not good for them. So lots of times we'll get, here's just an, to tell you a little bit about that. Sometimes we'll get in, say a hawk will come in and he's got a broken wing. And we can fix that bird. So we may, set the wing, and we may set him up in a really quiet place and give him food and not handle him at all. But if he's got to stay with us too long, he's so frightened every single day because he knows we're around, even if he can't see us, even if we cover his cage. He's so frightened that sometimes they will stop eating. They just won't eat, absolutely won't eat. They kind of give up. So for an animal to live around humans all the time would almost be kind of, a torture for them. So that's part of the reason why it's against the law for people to think that they can keep wild animals as pets. And because of that, it's against the law for veterinarians to help people to do that. So it gets tricky.
If someone finds a baby bird out of its nest, what should they do?
Well, baby birds are a tricky one because sometimes they jump down on the ground before they can fly. So if the baby bird is up and hopping and seems to be wide awake, I always tell people to keep all the pets away and keep kids at a distance. You can watch from a distance, and if you watch, you should see mom and dad go in and feed them and leave again. So you just kind of keep them safe. They can hop around in your yard, and sometimes they'll do that for a few days before they learn to fly.
Hopping?
They hop around. That's called a fledgling bird.
Oh, I saw that on your website, like
Yep.
a little fledgling bird.
Yep, they jump down from the nest and they'll hop on the ground. And you just have to watch them so that they stay safe.
Can these birds be fed bread?
No, bread is not good for them. When was the last time you were in the grocery store and you saw a bird standing in line with a loaf of bread?
Birds do not go shopping.
No, bread is not good for them. And that's another thing with wildlife and pets. You have to know what birds will eat. So something like a mourning dove or a pigeon, and I know you had an experience with saving a pigeon, those birds only like to eat seed. So they would eat seed. So bread wouldn't be good for them because they eat seed. Some birds will only eat bugs and berries. So you would have to feed them bugs and berries. But nobody eats bread. I mean, they may eat bread, but it's not good for them.
Only certain kinds can eat bread?
No, actually nobody should eat bread. No, none of them eat bread that they weren't designed to eat bread.
Only we can eat bread.
We eat bread, we do.
And it's delicious.
I like bread.
How should we care for them?
Care for birds? Well, as we talked about, maybe putting out a bird feeder with seed in it. There are different kinds of seeds you can put out. And then the suet's good to put out. Sometimes in the winter I put blueberries out for the robins that are around because the ground is frozen and they can't find worms.
You're making me hungry.
You like blueberries? That's another thing that they'll eat. So that's good to give robins in the winter.
What else would you like the viewers to know?
I think I'd like the viewers to know that there's a place that they can bring any animal or bird, wild animal or bird that they found that's in trouble, that there are people around them that are trained to help them. So they can always reach out to the wildlife clinic. And that phone number is 294-6363. And there's always good information and a phone number for someone else they can reach right away. So we can try to help all of the animals that end up needing our help to survive.
That's great. Thank you for caring about the animals and for coming on the show. It's been an honor.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching Bible Tea Time for Children. Thank you for watching. Come back next time. Bye-bye.